All right, a 31-27 victory for Tennessee on the road at South Carolina here on 99.1 thesportsanimal.com. I'm Erik Cain with Brian Rice. Brian, didn't look pretty, didn't expect it to look pretty, but end of the day, Tennessee pulled off its seventh win in a row and had another SEC win for Jeremy Pruitt as he begins year number 3.
We expected a sloppy, slow, very close game, and that's exactly what we got. We had Tennessee looking really good at times. We had Tennessee looking really bad at times. I think consistency is going to be the one thing that they're going to want to find this week when they get back to the practice field. But ultimately, it was not a game unlike what we expected coming in. And I think when you consider what else you saw around the SEC today, Jeremy Pruitt and his team have to be happy that they came away with a victory. They did just enough to get a win, and that's more than you can say for most of the league today.
We'll start with the quarterback position. Jerry Garantano finishes 19 of 31 passing, 259 yards with a touchdown. He also ran a touchdown earlier in the game as well. Made some nice throws, made some nice plays to where I thought he didn't panic. He dumped it off on that flea flicker. Instead of panicking, he dumped it off right there for a big gain, used his legs at times, but still inconsistent, missed high on a lot of throws. Jeremy Pruitt said in postgame that the receivers have missed a ton of practice time, so the timing has been off. But overall, what do you think about Jerry Garantano here tonight?
Well, the numbers you mentioned in a vacuum, you say, I'll take that.
Yeah.
But then when you watch the game, if he's accurate on some of the throws that he missed on, well, you probably win that game by 20 points. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the positive that Tennessee takes back. You won a game when you missed on some of those things, but that goes back to their 3 or 4 games you could say that about last year. I think what's got to be frustrating for Jeremy Pruitt and what's got to be frustrating probably for Jared Garantano himself is on some drives he looks like a quarterback that is unstoppable. And on some drives he looks like a quarterback that you can understand why fans get frustrated with him. And so I think going forward, finding that consistency, and I mean, it sounds like a broken record because that's what we've said about him for a couple of years, but it's getting closer. You see more of the flashes. They're not just flashes. They're extended periods where he looks like a good quarterback in the SEC, but then he's not throwing as well. He said in the postgame, hey, I was throwing off my back foot too much. That's going to cause the ball to sail. It certainly is. Okay, how do you fix that? Step up in the pocket, step up and make your throws. Just make sure that when you do that, you're not throwing bullets because that was his problem on a couple others, throwing it too hard or throwing it behind a receiver, not quite sidearming it, but if he can pick up that consistency, then I think he has a chance to be the quarterback that Jeremy Pruitt and this team need him to be this year.
Tennessee was 1 of 11 on third downs tonight. So I don't think I've ever covered a game where a team with that stat line or worse ended up winning the football game. And some of them were bad throws by Garantano. A couple of them were drops. What was the biggest thing when you were evaluating third downs here tonight? Maybe it was play calling a little bit. Why did Tennessee struggle so much on third downs here tonight?
I think them struggling on third down was almost a product of what they were doing on first and second down. They left themselves in a lot of third and longs. When you saw Tennessee, for the most part, be in a third and short, apologies for the cuckoo clock in the background, but when you saw Tennessee be efficient on first down, be efficient on second down, there wasn't a third down. They were picking up second down conversions, and they weren't getting to third down. So that's something else that you've got to push through and something else that you've got to correct as you go forward is putting yourself in positions for third and short if you get to third down because you're going to have to be better than 1 for 11. There are not many games over the years that have gone 1 for 11 where you win that football game. Doesn't happen.
How often does that clock go off? Because it is kind of creepy.
It's once an hour.
Oh, my goodness.
It thankfully has a darkness sensor so it doesn't go off in the middle of the night.
Woo.
But there is nobody that hates the clock more than our dog, Wembley Rice.
I can imagine. Bayless Jones Jr., quite a coming out party for the graduate transfer from USC. Found different ways to get him the football, kind of on some tosses, some underneath routes. He returned some. He was out there on special teams. I thought Bayless Jones Jr. had a pretty nice night tonight. And I think he's a weapon that Jim Chaney, Jared Garantano, and that offense can really utilize this year.
He is. If you have a kicker on the opposing side that is not putting it through the end zone, you're going to have a chance to start better than the 25-yard line. I think he has that green light and will have that green light against most teams. He also showed what he could do on the sweep game. He also showed what he can do as a receiver, was the target for Jared Garantano across the middle a couple of times, and then in a quick pass on the outside. When you have somebody with that kind of speed that has the moves and the ability that he has, it's just an extra weapon. But I thought overall the receiver group stepped up in a big way tonight. Brandon Johnson had the big one-handed catch early in the game that set up Tennessee on a scoring drive. You had Josh Palmer be the steady, consistent guy that he's been. But Jones adds something new to it, and it was great to see, and I think that's something that you can build on as you go forward this season.
8 different players had at least one reception in the ball game tonight. I thought that was a positive. Of course, really it's 7. One of that reception went from Will Albright on the roll punt earlier in the first half. But again, some encouraging signs from Jeremy Pruitt in post game. He's a freshman, somewhat of a local kid from Greenville High School. Jeremy Pruitt said it happens. He's going to move on. We think he's the best long snapper in the country, so we're going to roll with him. And so that was good to hear. But let's flip the script and go to defense. And first, 2 big things I want to point out. I'll start kind of a mix-up in the secondary. Jalen McCullough and Warren Burrell have missed a lot of practice. Bryce Thompson started at safety tonight. Danico Slaughter, a true freshman, started at star, where Sham Schamberger did not play tonight. He was out as well. That meant that Alontae Taylor, Kenneth George Jr. were starting at the corners. And at times tonight, Tennessee could not stop the slant. The slant destroyed that secondary pretty much all night. Not the best night from the secondary, but I think that this is a positive, showing that, hey, when you have essentially 3 starters out, a cornerback playing safety, you guys mixing around, you're starting a true freshman in game number 1, and you come out with a win, I think that's still a positive.
Yeah, when you're replacing as much as Tennessee is on the back end, having guys out due to injury, illness, whatever it is going to challenge you further. And I think that's what we saw tonight. There's a positive and a negative for Tennessee tonight on defense. The positive is at times they look dominant, particularly up front. You saw Tyler Barron come in. We really haven't heard that he was even going to be a factor on the defensive line this year, even on the record or off the record. And the Knoxville native from Knoxville Catholic comes off the edge, makes a couple of big plays in the first half, makes a big play in the second half. So that's a positive you take from that. The negative is you don't have a lot of lateral speed at linebacker. And I think you're going to be susceptible to the slant all year unless you develop something there. Now, how does Tennessee do that? How do you find that little piece? How do you disguise that little piece? That's going to be a question for Tennessee over the next few weeks, because otherwise you're going to see every other team look at that and say, here's what we've got to do. Here's where we can go when we need to get a first down. And they're going to do the same thing with running backs and try to get them out in space and out on the edge. And if you can do that, pick up 3-4 yards, that's going to be an effective play. So how Tennessee counters that, how they find a way to either scheme around it or adjust their personnel, I think is going to be fascinating going into the week. But you get a little positive, a little negative, but overall, when they needed to get stops, they got stops, and that was a very important thing tonight.
Yeah, on those slants, I mean, if you want to play cover 3, you're going to have those inside backers will be taking those hook curls. And so it's up to those guys to drop and drive on those. If you want to disguise in the back end, maybe show cover 2, then slide down to cover 3. Maybe run man underneath, put 2 guys free over the top, whatever you have to do. And again, we'll give the benefit of the doubt to Derek Ansley and Jeremy Pruitt, because they will do that stuff. They'll mix and match all season long. You brought up the pressure. DeAndre Johnson stole all the headlines tonight. He had 2 sacks, and that's great. DeAndre Johnson's a guy that I feel like's been here forever. He was the guy opposite of a couple guys in years. Of course, Darrell Taylor, but even the one, oh my gosh, Kongbo. There we go.
Yeah,
Kongbo 2 years ago. And he's been here. He's done that. He stepped up tonight, and he was that number 1. But I got to say as well, I feel like every time DeAndre Johnson got a sack, Kevon Bennett was bringing the pressure from the other side, forcing Colin Hill to step up right into the lap of DeAndre Johnson. And that's what you want from your edge presence. I really thought, you mentioned Tyler Barron, saw some other guys come in and play as well. I thought those pass rushers, though not perfect, off to a good start.
Yeah, you need to find depth at that position because those guys wore down as the game went on. That was very evident, particularly in the last couple of drives. I'm terrified of what that last drive would have looked like with a minute and a half left, because I don't know how much Tennessee had left in the tank on defense. I think getting the special teams blunder by South Carolina and awareness from a true freshman, Jimmy Holiday, in recovering the ball was huge, because I don't know what you had left. So, again, a little positive, a little negative. The positive is those guys played really well throughout the night. The negative is when they were on the field a lot, they looked gassed.
Mhm.
How do you get around that? How do you improve that? And the answer is not getting them in better condition. You're not going to get guys in better condition. Maybe they pick it up a little bit as the season goes on when you're used to playing 60 snaps of actual real football. But the real answer is trying to create some depth there. And I think that you saw flashes from Tyler Barron helps, that you'll get some other guys in that rotation. That all helps. But, right now, they're a little thin there, and they're going to have to try to scheme it or develop some depth because those guys cannot wear down late in games as you go through this season with Georgia in a couple of weeks. I mean, even Missouri next week, they didn't look good against Alabama tonight, but they're going to bring a challenge to Neyland Stadium next Saturday.
And I'll say this too on your point. We'll wrap this up here in just a minute, but on the conditioning part, we don't know which one of those guys have been missing some time. We know that Tennessee's missed a lot of time, so I think that conditioning overall should improve. Now it'll get to a point to where it can't get any better, to your point, but I do think, especially from game 1 to game 2. Plus, there's one thing to where you can be in shape, but getting in game shape, and week 1 you see that across the board. A lot of guys are tired, and Tennessee was gassed tonight, especially on the defensive end. So hopefully that can improve the more and more guys continue to get back in practice and continue to get those reps. One more thing, let's move the defensive line. An okay game. The strengths and numbers with that unit. There's so many guys that play. But I got to say, man, Elijah Simmons playing that many snaps tonight, his body has transformed from, quite frankly, just being pudgy to just a stocky human being.
Yeah.
He looked – he didn't make a whole lot of plays tonight, but he was out there so much, and that's a good sign.
Yeah, and just not making plays, but he was consistently out there, and he was consistently taking up the attention of the South Carolina offensive line. And sometimes, we're not used to the 3-4 scheme as much as some fan bases are. But really, the job of that guy in the middle in a 3-4 defensive line is to eat up attention, is to draw a double team.
Yep.
And he did that. And I think when you see the defensive ends flash in a 3-4 scheme, when you see guys coming off the edge, whether it's the end or the linebacker, that means that the guy in the middle is doing his job and he's commanding that attention. I think Elijah Simmons did that tonight. That really helps. And it also helps set up guys like Henry T to make plays. Saw his big play getting his interception and his touchdown. But
he played running back in years past.
Yeah, it's showing that double stiff arm on some guys. So it was good to see. But, yeah, when you're talking about Elijah Simmons in the middle, when you're talking about anybody that's going to play in that defensive tackle, nose tackle position in the 3-4, if the other guys are showing themselves well, that means that guy in the middle is doing really well.
Progress report time. I know you had Tennessee winning, but what was your score prediction?
My score prediction, I believe, was 27-24. So they won by 4 instead of 3. That means in our pick segment on Friday, I didn't pick them to cover, and they did by a point. So glad I didn't put actual real money on that. But, I think it was right where I thought they would be. The positive for Tennessee is you've won a lot of close games. Longest win streak among Power 5 teams right now at 7 games. A lot of those games were close games. But several of them, like tonight, like the bowl game, like Kentucky last year, shouldn't have been close games. And so now I think the challenge is you go back to the practice field. The old adage is you make the most progress from game 1 to game 2. The progress they need to make is finishing those throws, finishing those drives, and making sure that when you have the chance to blow out a team, you do it. And you don't let them hang around. Because, again, by grace of God and the bounce of the football, it bounces off of a South Carolina player with a minute and a half left. If it doesn't, how much do you have in the tank to defend a drive down the field? They played pretty well at times. They didn't play well at other times. What did you have left? I don't know, but I think a more complete effort to finish the drill is something they need going forward.
Yeah, I think my final score prediction, I believe, was 24-17. So I had him by a touchdown. But the important thing is we both picked them to win. Tennessee did win, and it's a good start to the season. Jeremy Pruitt says there's a lot of things to work on, but he's happy to get this win. He said just playing football tonight was a win in itself. So a sloppy game, but a lot of things to improve on, and we're going to break it all down tomorrow, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all the way up until Tennessee kicks off Saturday at Neyland Stadium, noon Eastern time, right here on the Sports Animal. For Brian Rice, I am Erik Cain. Tennessee a winner tonight, 27-31 to 27 over South Carolina in Columbia.